It is Wednesday, August 12th, 2026, coming to you from America's beautiful North Coast, from the shores of Lake Superior. This is The American Descent. I'm your host, Sam Martin.
And I'm Jen Schultz.
Before we dive in, please subscribe to our channel. Hit the like button, leave a comment. It all helps as we begin our journey here on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast, please leave a 5-star review. Thank you ever so much. On today's show, wow, a wild and crazy primary day yesterday in the upper Midwest, putting a seeming nail in the coffin of having any confidence in primary polling. Polls were wildly off in the key contested races in Minnesota and Wisconsin in completely different ways. In a primary that set turnout records in both states, what many thought would be a squeaker in Minnesota between Peggy Flanagan and Angie Craig turned out to be a near 20-point blowout. Meanwhile, the race that seemed completely out of reach for establishment Democrats mere days ago turned into a nail-biting, extremely narrow win for the establishment in Wisconsin. We have an emergency guest on today's podcast to talk about what the hell happened in those races and in others. Other important results from yesterday, a very sad day for fans of lumpy pillows. Mike My Pillow Lindell lost his primary for Minnesota governor by a wide margin, though he, in what can only be described as deliciously on brand, is refusing to go quietly, claiming that voting irregularities may have cheated him out of the GOP nomination. Matt Little, the DFL-endorsed candidate from the left running to replace outgoing Representative Angie Craig in Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District, also won his primary handily. In Connecticut, the left did not fare as well. Longtime Representative John Larson in the 1st Congressional District lost to the apparently AI industry-backed challenger Luke Bronin, who ran on the need for younger politicians to win, while leftist challenger Josh Elliott, who took on incumbent Governor Ned Lamont, lost badly. In Wisconsin, Rebecca Cook will move on to a rematch against Republican Derek Van Orden in the 3rd Congressional District. Cook was oddly backed by both conservative Blue Dog Democrats and by Bernie Sanders in her race. On the GOP side of things, the very young Michael Alfonso, son-in-law of current Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, won his crowded primary for the open 7th Congressional District in Wisconsin, which, like northern Minnesota, has gone from being a Democratic stronghold in the past to a reliable Republican one. The seat was vacant because the incumbent will be the GOP candidate for governor in the state of Wisconsin, the prominent election denier Tom Tiffany. Lastly, in South Carolina, the special election to replace the late Senator Lindsey Graham is headed to a special runoff election to take place on August 25th between the Trump-endorsed sister of the late senator, Darlene Graham, who is currently serving out her brother's term in the Senate, and Representative Ralph Norman, a far-right Freedom Caucus member who's served in the House since 2017. As we look forward to the general election in November, the president, on a far-right show with host Wayne Allen Root, suggested that he would consider declaring a state of emergency in order to bypass Congress and implement his voter suppression initiatives. These headlines and more up for discussion on today's Dissent. And Jen, since yesterday was such a crazy day, we might as well turn things over right away to our guest, shall we?
I think so.
Okay, so joining us now is Craig Grau, a professor emeritus of political science at the University of Minnesota in Duluth and all-around doyen of political knowledge in northern Minnesota. Craig Grau, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
You got it. So, Craig, where do you want to start?
Let's start with Wisconsin.
A good place to start. So, let's talk about this gubernatorial race. I am fed up with primary polling, Craig. In the days before the election, polls have been consistently showing Francesca Hong with like leads over 20%. Granted, with a large undecided vote, but usually an undecided vote doesn't break as strongly as it did. But it did. What
Did
I have my theories, but what are yours?
well, first of all, let me defend polling a little bit. Polling is used by the media as a predictor. It has never, ever taken that on as a role. A poll is a snapshot at a period of time. Now, the one thing about primaries is primaries are almost always, it's tight ones, or competitive ones are often fluid. People, they don't know the candidates quite yet. And of course, Wisconsin was crazy. We had a situation where a month before less than a month before the election, we had Dave Crowley, exec from Milwaukee County, leave the race, endorse Rodriguez. Next week, she drops out of the race. Crowley then comes back in. Barnes, who is the other lieutenant governor on the ballot from the two lieutenant governors running, he says, well, Han was going to win, so he dropped out. And so you had this, I told some people about a week before, the best way to get a feeling for Wisconsin politics is to go to YouTube and watch the routine by Abbott and Costello, who's on first, what's on second, et cetera. But I think what happened in the last week, a couple things happened in the last week. And I think it was kind of interesting. I'm not always pro media, but the reporters that they sent into Wisconsin realized that the polls weren't accurate. That it was, now the poll showed that she was going to get 34, 32, 30. She got 39. It said everything else went on the other side. And even some of her supporters heard what the Republicans were doing. I mean, including the president of the United States, that they were going to basically use her as the poster child for the midterm election. They didn't want that. Yeah, even some of her supporters didn't want that. What they wanted to do is to be sure that Tom Tiffany was defeated in the midterm election. And so it was a interesting election, but I think, then you hear this, the establishment. I'd like to see what their names and addresses are. The name of the game was, I think, is that Governor Evers got involved. And he said, I don't want to lose everything we've worked for. What he meant was, he came in, if you recall, in 2018, as the most boring candidate in the United States, and had a state legislature that was 2/3 Republican and gerrymandered to bits, as was the congressional districts. He took it from that to now having really a 55-45 in both houses, a possibility of keeping, of course, the governorship. And he got involved, and he clearly put his arm around Crowley. Barnes gets out. Rodriguez had a problem with her treasurer, apparently, and she got out because fraud's an issue, could be an issue there also. And the undecided split. Let me just mention the couple things that I thought were most interesting. I didn't see this, but I heard people comparing her to Michigan and the colleges. If you look at the counties, she basically did carry every college county. I mean, starting with Kenosha, which has got Parkside and Carthage, but then she doesn't get anything else until she gets to Madison. Got Cross and county next door, Eau Claire county next door, UWS and counties next door and below. She got the Indian reservations in Sawyer County and Menominee County. But the students weren't there. They're not there yet. Now, maybe the Republicans are correct that colleges and college towns are these leftist places that you send your kids to get indoctrinated. At least that's the way they voted. They voted for very progressive. And Green Bay, Oshkosh,
Appleton.
Lawrence and Ripon, she carried all those areas.
Mhm.
But if, here's just something speculated, of course, if the primary had been in September, like it used to be, as in Minnesota, those college kids were there. They're very much the Democratic Socialists are very much person to person. Who knows what would have happened? Or maybe the Crowley types would have gotten better organized also. Whatever. It was a hugely close race. And
Incredibly.
yet you carried all the college towns. The other interesting one is people were saying, yes, they say, what's a democratic socialist sort of thing? Well, Medicare for all. But then they said she could reach across party lines with the data center issue. Well, the data center county of the world is Racine County. Crowley carried it. And he carried it by as much. If she'd have carried it that much, she probably would have been governor. I mean, it was that close. It was very, very close.
Yeah,
but
well,
Kenosha,
it was 3,000 votes. Sorry to interrupt, but just
almost 4. I mean, there's still
4.
Hudson, but 3 or 4, yeah.
That is,
And she lost Racine County by almost 2,000. If she'd have carried it by 2,000, and that's the data center county. They've got, that's my home county. And if you go, you see people that built their fences near the place so they don't have the noise and all that kind of stuff. This is that old Foxconn thing, right? This is what happened to Foxconn. They made a big data center, and then they were going to put a second data center in northern Racine County. Then they tried Ozaukee County, and there was so much opposition, they just doubled the one down there in Mount Pleasant, which is a town, a village in Racine County.
And Racine is where the former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, was from. Is that right?
Well, technically, he was from that district. He came from Janesville, which is 2 counties to the west.
Okay.
But not only that, but Priebus, the former head of the Republican Party, came from Kenosha County. So it's been a counties that have swung Republicans, kind of like northern Minnesota, somewhat.
So here's 2 other things that I've heard, Craig, and I mean you're the guy when it comes to demographics, but 2 things that I've heard people comment about, how close this election was. Any number of things could have tipped the balance. The Hahn campaign refused to go up on television anywhere. And in those counties that you mentioned that were the college counties in western Wisconsin, those are also Minnesota television market counties where Crowley's ads weren't up as much on television. And she won a lot of those counties, as you said, Douglas County and La Crosse, Eau Claire, all that stuff, more in the Minnesota media market. And the other thing is, as you said, people who might have voted for her were convinced by that electability argument. And I feel like probably that's going to be a generational thing, right? Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that electability argument has more salience with older voters than younger. I feel I may be wrong about that, but definitely television has a lot of salience for older voters since most younger people are entirely on streaming. And she was up on ads on streaming, but on traditional television, she wasn't at all, not even defensively.
Yeah,
and so I'm wondering,
the worst thing for her was that the word got around that the Republicans had put $4 million into ads promoting her. And when that got around, people thought, Ooh, that's not a good sign. But still, I think another story is, and nobody wants to talk about this, I guess. I understand. But oh man, like 40,000, 60,000 votes were cast for people who weren't on the ballot.
More than
I
that,
mean,
I think. Yeah.
just think of the race was between 3 and 4,000, and 10 times that many
You mean
people.
they were write-ins, Craig?
No.
Oh,
They were
These are
on the
people that
ballot. They were just dropped
they
out.
voted early.
People, they
Yeah,
were still on the
I know.
ballot, but they had dropped out of the race.
Well, yes, and they were in the race when people voted early because they dropped
Right.
out so late. I mean, they got their ballots in July, and Barnes was still on the ballot. I know people voted for Barnes, because he's lieutenant governor, qualified, and all that sort of stuff, right? He drops out. Where does your vote go? The decision of the election board was you can't do over, so your vote's gone. So
Wow.
you talk about 40 to 60,000 votes gone.
Well, people will think twice about voting early next time.
I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm. What struck me, Craig, is the number of the Democrats came out in force. Record numbers in Minnesota, got over 1 million voters voting in the primary, set records. That's about 25% of eligible voters. But also just the number of Dems versus Republicans in both Wisconsin and Republican. Does that say anything about the turnout?
Absolutely.
Are Republicans not excited to go vote?
I think that's very important conclusion. And I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago to some people who are watching election. I said, watch the turnout ratio. And in Wisconsin it was 3-2, and they only had one major race on the ballot, right? But 3-2, Democrats and Republicans, in a state that's called the swing state of the United States. 3-2, that's 750,000 to 500,000. And in Minnesota, it's even more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And we had two major races for both parties.
I know.
Both
it was
parties.
almost double the number of Dems compared to
700 to 400.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. So it shows you where the enthusiasm is. And the Republicans, I would think, are be very nervous. Looking at the only two states that I noticed that they had more in the primaries now was a few weeks back was Iowa. Republicans just barely squeezed out more votes in Iowa, and I think Ohio, but everybody else has been way over on Democratic side.
This is going to scare.
Well,
including
Ohio hasn't gone yet.
Is it still?
No, they're primaries. They're
They're primary.
Yes. Yeah, of course.
Texas was more.
What scares me is now Republicans are going to see this turnout, and they may now, maybe they'll rethink supporting the SAVE Act and maybe go along with Trump trying to take people's vote away, make it harder to vote.
It's going to be a problem. That whole thing, and what happened in the Twin Cities in Michigan. There were Justice Department people at the polls. That's not a good thing.
No, Minnesota, Keith Ellison, our AG, Attorney General, and Secretary of State Steve Simon in Minnesota sent people to watch the Department of Justice poll watchers to make sure nothing went wrong. But nothing happened in Michigan, so they said, I'm sure everything will be fine. And I haven't heard any stories where there was any problems at the polling locations.
But the one problem is what Sam just quoted was the interview with Trump.
Yeah.
That's scary stuff.
It is,
for a democracy.
Yes.
Scary stuff.
Very much so. Although, to be fair, anytime anyone comes at Trump with some idea off the top of their head, he always says, well, we'll consider it. Every single time. Whether he plans on considering it or not, he always says that. I mean, he's the true television president. I mean.
Yeah, more than anybody else.
For sure. But I do kind of want to go back to my question about demographics, because there is the argument about electability was used in Wisconsin, Craig, but it was also used against Abdul El Sayed by Haley Stevens, and it was also used against Peggy Flanagan by Angie Craig. So, different outcome, obviously, for Francesca Hahn, although it was so close. I mean, almost 4,000 votes. But first of all, I believe that argument has far less salience after they said Hillary Clinton was more electable and after they said, don't worry, Kamala Harris will win. It has less credibility. But in Wisconsin, they managed, as you said, because Tony Evers went all in for David Crowley in a big way.
But very late.
Well, yeah, everything happened very late.
Yeah.
But that was the main argument, was not David Crowley stands for you. It's no, David Crowley is more likely to beat Tom Tiffany. But I don't understand, Craig, how they have, nobody knows who's more electable. I don't think anyone has the universal knowledge that so-and-so is more electable than someone else, because so many people have been wrong about that. But is that demographically, is that an age thing, or who does that appeal to primarily?
Well, the one problem that I think you're getting at is that the Democrats, at least the Democratic Socialists like Hahn, and also in Michigan, they told you what they stood for and what they wanted to accomplish once they got to Washington, D.C. You didn't hear that from Crowley. Well, he didn't have much time. He had bought tickets to Jamaica already before he was convinced to come back in the race, right? But what he's got to do, and by the way, Peggy hasn't done too much of this either. She has said Medicare for all, but I think where the Democrats still need work for the midterm election, and it's always, I know they think it's dangerous. They've got to come up with a reason why the moderates and maybe even some of the swing Republicans would come over and vote for them to make it a real major blue wave. They've got Trump, but that'll take you only so far. It'll take you, you got a fair amount of people that are upset. But, fool me once, where one person says I'll lower the prices and the Democrats just say affordability, that's not enough. They've got to have more than that. And one of the things that Hahn and the winning candidate in Michigan did was they at least presented what they wanted to accomplish. Besides going, they really had a good ground game. Both of them did.
Well, I haven't listened to Crowley speak. Is he dynamic, charismatic? No.
The only time I hear him speak is every time I go to Billy Mitchell Airport, and he greets me. Not he himself, but I hear this voice saying, "I'm David Crowley, the executive of Milwaukee County, and I want to invite you to see all the great sites of Milwaukee County, including Lake Michigan." He's not a bad speaker. He was a former state legislator and stuff like that. But he's going to have a fast course here.
Well, Craig, his big pitch was, I want to hear all sides. Everyone has something to contribute, Republicans and Democrats. And he even said he's open to listening to the arguments from the data center folks. So one could argue that he's fairly out of step with Democrats, but they just elected him in, again, not because they're like, oh boy, David Crowley. I mean, he dropped out of the race for a reason. He did not catch fire with anybody.
He was the vehicle for dislike of Trump. That's what he was.
Well, Wisconsinites will have to get behind him now if they want to beat Tom Tiffany, who's
right. But I still want to dig into this electability thing because I mean, someone who doesn't stand for anything. I mean, maybe he'll have a platform going forward, but he doesn't really have a platform. He just has kind of these meaningless bipartisanship rah-rah statements.
Well, he's going to get a whole team now he's going to get a whole team now. But he's
Yeah,
going to get
so
a whole
what?
team
But
now. It'll come. It'll
fine,
come.
but how is that electable? Explain to me, Craig, how is that
They want to
electable?
win. They want to win more than anything. That's what they want,
But
Wisconsin.
that's not enough.
Well, sometimes if you really, really dislike somebody enough, like the Democrats do the Republicans right now, they'll come out to vote. The Republicans are disappointed. They might not come out to vote to get elected, but that's still not the problem. The problem becomes the next step, which you're hinting at, Sam, is then what do you do once you get elected? This isn't just the press treats elections as horse races. After the horse race is over, the horse goes and eats grain. What legislators are supposed to do is fix the country, and they haven't told us how they're going to do that. Not well, not very well at all. They're just the Democrats are still scared of Grover Norquist. No one uses his name anymore, but and the Democrats have to realize that there's one party that is the party of government. They want to see the government succeed. And there's one that wants to shrink it so they can drown it in a bathtub, except for defense. And that's the Republican Party. And if the Democrats are going to do that, you look at the national government and they're hurting. The Democrats are hurt, the government's hurting, and the Democrats are hurting by not giving us a way to save the government.
You should explain that Grover Norquist, because we might have a lot of young people in the audience that don't remember that.
Grover Norquist was a young Republican with a fellow named Ralph Reed and a bunch of other people that came up during the Reagan administration. And Grover Norquist went around and got people to sign pledges saying they would never raise taxes. And when the people who signed the pledge, they thought it was just for that session. He informed them afterwards that it was for the rest of their lives. We know one that signed it, and she got very upset. But I thought the man who handled Grover the best was Stephen Colbert when he's on his old show. And Grover came on the show and he said, Grover, if somebody has kidnapped your grandmother and they say that the only way they'll let her go is that you have to raise taxes, what would you do? He said, we'll still have the photographs and memories. He got booed by the audience, as he should have done, but that was his line. And let me just take this opportunity to make my pitch that I've been trying to do for the last 3 years. According to the law, the President of the United States is supposed to propose a budget. The budget for 2027, which is supposed to go into effect in 60 days, was supposed to be proposed by, at the latest, the first week of February. It was not, just like the year before. It was not. It still hasn't been proposed. What they have been doing in Washington, D.C. is taking the last Biden budget and amending it. That's what the big, beautiful bill was an amendment. So we don't have on a piece of paper where the money's coming from and where it's going. And what they do when they propose a budget is they give you the last 5-10 years, they give you the next 5-10 years. Now, they can't promise that, but they can give you a feeling for what's going on. For example, just simple things. How much money's coming in for tariffs? Do we know? How much money has come in for tariffs? How much money is coming in from income taxes? We do know that the debt is pushing 40 trillion. We do know that the interest on the debt has gone up dramatically because interest rates went up from about 300-400 billion to $1 trillion. So that we now spend, until the changes are made on the defense budget, more on the interest on the debt than defense. And yet we have no piece of paper. What they've done in the Senate, as you know, last week, is they kick the can down the road till the first week of December again. That's just the Biden budget. What the Democrats need to do is to tell us how to save the government from bankruptcy. And the little stuff that people see is misleading. For example, they say that Social Security is going to run out in 2032. We're already running a deficit in Social Security, have been for 5 years. Where does the money come from? We're borrowing from the banks.
Well, that's the Social Security Trust Fund.
Yeah, it's
not Social Security itself is automatically paid for by the Treasury, but the trust fund is running.
No,
low.
It's not going. It's gone. They borrow for the last 20 years. They've siphoned it off.
It's like like a piece of paper that says this is what we owe the Treasury.
It's an IOU and the only way you can cash it in is go to income taxes. Well, there's no money in the income tax. We're using that already. So we have to borrow the money. Now, why did we do that? You can make Democrats could make an argument that over the last 20 years, we were able to give rich people tax cuts because the deficit wouldn't go up so much because we were siphoning it off of the Social Security Trust. We siphoned off $3 trillion since 1985. What? Something like that? $3 trillion. And now, real easy argument. You can say it's time to pay the piper for those people that got the tax cuts, the billionaires. Take, as Jen has said before, take the lid off, right? Take the lid off and let everybody pay their, quote, fair share. At least what that would do is to make Social Security solvent again, and we wouldn't have to siphon off money by asking the banks. And I'm not going into economics, but it seems to me that when you have more people asking for more money from the banks, that 10-year note keeps going up, and that makes it harder for people to get loans to build their houses. So it's a mega thing. It's not socialism as such, unless you call Social Security socialism or whatever. It's getting people to pay their fair share. And by the Democrats doing that, they can reach over and get some Republicans who've been talking about this for a long time to come on board, because the present Republican administration is fiscally irresponsible.
Right. Well, Greg, that is the pitch coming from DSA or other leftist insurgent candidates. This is our argument. Like Abdul El-Sayed in Michigan, he's not DSA, but he's an ally. He's aligned with that. And he says, listen, I want to get money out of politics, put money in your pocket, pass Medicare for all. That's his thing that he repeats every time he's on with anything. It's very clear message. If you dig into it, yes, you'll find raising the cap or getting rid of the cap on Social Security taxes, all that kind of stuff. It's all in there. And his theory and the theory of the DSA candidates and the theory of the people backing this progressive movement, this progressive surge, is that argument, which you just laid out, can win. The argument against it is no, they're not electable. And that's why I keep going back to that. The left is saying it is electable. We can get elected on these promises, on these issues.
No, I personally think the argument that they've used against progressives are not their economic arguments. They're using their cultural arguments against them. The thing that hurt Hahn in Wisconsin was doing away with Thanksgiving, sort of thing. It has, and I saw an interview just an hour ago with Peggy Flanagan. They were on her like crazy on At what age do you allow transgender? It's cultural. That's all they got because they have no economic arguments left.
Right. Well, and then it was, and in the case of Francesca Hung, it was like Democrats using that against her. But what Zoran Mondani, for instance, or Abdullah al-Sayed were extremely good at doing, and now these are like generationally talented politicians. I mean, it's a little unfair to compare everyone to those two guys because they're so talented and they're so fast on their feet. But they have all those, like posts and stuff from their past that they can be attacked on culturally. And every time Mondani fielded a question where he was asked about one of these posts from 20 years ago or whatever, he said, well, that was then. Let me talk about what I want to do for New Yorkers now. He won, and now he's been governing in a way that's very visible for all to see. And what he provides for a lot of these candidates on the left is, you see what Zoran's doing in New York. That's what I want to do for my constituency. That's what I want to do for you. Now, it's different when you're running to be a legislator, obviously, as Jen has pointed out to me many times, but that doesn't matter, because the argument is, because Zoran has presented he's presented tangible results.
But he walked back a lot of those folks that had bad tweets that didn't age well. They walked them back, or they said they don't believe that anymore. I think
they were still asked about them.
I know, but Francesca Hung, I don't think she did that for every one of her tweets. She pivoted and she didn't want to talk about it.
One of her problems is she was never in a statewide race before, and so
she wasn't as
right. And to tell you the truth, Peggy's kind of in the same way. She's never really by herself been in a statewide race, so she's a little. I mean, she hasn't. And I just heard a couple of reporters, national reporters, saying it. She's got to get smoother on her answers. They aren't. They just. It sounded like she hadn't thought of the question before.
I know she needs just one or two sentences to answer those questions, and sometimes she. But I'm sure she'll. The more she does it, she gets better and better. I remember her very first speech, and she's come a long way. And I just listened to her entire speech at First Ave, which is, the music venue, the coolest music venue where the coolest musicians play in Minneapolis. That just tells you something about how cool Peggy Flanagan is. But I will say it was an amazing speech because she emphasized during the campaign, she had a narrative, and she said, this is about the many over the money, and the many just won. And she repeated that. She was outspent incredibly. And I kind of disagree with you there, Craig, because she has a really competent campaign team, and it was a grassroots effort, and it was all about organizing, which is her bread and butter. Peggy Flanagan was an organizer.
I didn't say her campaign was badly run. Campaign was well run. Saying that on television, she has to get She had a real problem with Angie in the debate on the Almanac Show. She's getting better. She just got to keep getting better.
Yeah, I think she's uncomfortable to run against another DFL or another Democrat. I think that maybe is out of her comfort. But I think her victory speech at First Ave and pointing out everything that's wrong with Michelle Tafoya, her Republican opponent in the U.S. Senate race in Minnesota, was great. And she laid out what she wants to do, what she wants to accomplish for people, and the problems with her Republican opponent, and tying her Republican opponent to Trump. And it was a great speech. So I think she just has to repeat that and use some of those same talking points when she's in front of a reporter, national reporter. Remember, she was lieutenant governor. She was not in front of the camera, right? She was in the back behind the governor. So she'll get better. She'll be tighter with her responses. And I think her speech, if you haven't heard it, it's on YouTube. You guys should go listen to the whole speech.
Yeah, I watched it last night. It was very good. And she is good on the stump. I've seen her on the stump. Craig, Jen, and I did on an episode a couple weeks ago when she did the NPR debate. We kind of did a very granular step-by-step breakdown of that debate, because I was pretty unsatisfied with it myself. But to go back to this broader picture of the cultural versus the economic, is candidate quality is very meaningful, because all of these candidates are going to have tweets and texts and positions from the past that they might want to run away from, or they might not want to talk about. But the press is just, that's what they love the most, is bringing these things up. And when they brought it up with Mamdani, he immediately pivoted back to the 4 things he ran on, which was free childcare, fast and free buses, freeze the rent, and public grocery stores. And then Abdul al-Sayed did the exact same thing. He took that question about cultural stuff and moved it immediately into economics. What Francesca Hahn did not do is the same thing. She answered the question on its terms about Thanksgiving. She did not pivot it.
But she also didn't have a lot of time as a front runner. She was only in the front for a month, maybe. There's just not a lot of time to build that and to get your message out there.
Well, she was talented at retail politics, from what everybody says, but she didn't have that media. I don't know if you can say, well, Abdul al-Sayed had a podcast. He was pretty well media trained. I don't know where Zoran Mamdani got his absolutely incredible, ability in front of the camera abilities. It's just pretty remarkable. But
didn't he run for governor?
Mamdani? No.
He was in the New York Assembly. Yes. Sayed.
No. Abdul al-Sayed ran for governor in 2018. That's right. Yep. So he had a shot at being a statewide candidate. Yeah, he lost badly to Gretchen Whitmer that year, but obviously 2018 was an extremely different time. We've had a pandemic since then.
Do we want to talk about any of the Republican races, like the Mike Lindell, My Pillow guy CEO? It looked like the polls were predicting he would be the front win, and he lost badly by Lisa Damath, who was the former Minnesota House Speaker.
As a person I was talking to this morning said, just imagine being the Republican State Central Committee. They're going to have a meeting to see if they're going to endorse any of the candidates that had beat their endorsed candidates, right?
Yeah, Kendall Claw was endorsed in that race, and he lost really badly.
Came in third.
I think he only won in one county. Is that right? Southern County.
I didn't look at those, but he came in third, and I mean, she just ran away with it on the Senate race. So, and let me caution you. And I know this sounds like it's old school stuff, but if you look at the history of Minnesota, the most popular stance over its history is moderate republicanism. And for some reason, that party decided to ditch it around the year 2000, and they haven't won since. She is not conservative. Tafoya, I mean, she's pro choice. And she had written a letter to Mr. Trump telling him not to run for president. He doesn't forget those kind of things, right? And the one thing I noticed that Qualls and I keep saying the pillow guy used against the unendorsed winner yesterday for governor was that it's harder for her to use the issue of fraud because she was part of the problem.
She was in the. So she was there. Yep.
Yeah. So I think they've got pluses and they've got minuses as a Republican Party, but they really the endorsed process for the Republicans really looked terrible this year, and they might, there's rumors about just doing away with endorsements.
Well, I think I've heard that from both parties. They want to get rid of the endorsement process because they feel like it's too extreme, and maybe that's true for Republicans. But just for so our audience knows, in Minnesota, the candidates that won the primary on the Republican side for U.S. Senate and governor's race were not endorsed by the Republican Party. They endorsed Kendall Qualls for governor, and they didn't endorse Michelle Tafoya, who's now the Republican challenger to Peggy Flanagan for U.S. Senate. They endorsed an extremist, didn't they?
Well, yeah. You mean it
Adam
depends what
Schwarzy, I think, is what they. So
I'll tell you. I saw him when she wouldn't show up on the Almanac show for the debate. He came across very well, veteran, etc. And I thought he came across very, very well. But where the Democrats are going to have some problems, I think they may know it, is down ballot, which is attorney general and auditor. The Republicans haven't won a statewide race since 12. Really, the last governor since 2002 or something like that, right? It's been 2 decades. But I think there's going to be problems. Ellison's is going to have a tough race, and just the word auditor, even though it has nothing to do with the fraud they're talking about, that doesn't matter, right?
So Zach Flipovich is a Democrat running for auditor, and it was against Scott Jensen, who's a former Minnesota senator position, Republican, against Nate George, a mayor from a community north of St. Cloud. And I'm blanking on who won. Was it George that won, or Scott Jensen?
I didn't see that, but
Will you look that
just
up,
the
Sam?
word, the word auditor is going to be a problem for the Democrats this year.
I know, but Zach Flipovich from Duluth, an accountant, he's got the right background for being a state auditor.
And he loves it. He loves accounting.
But remember, this is at the local level. This is, auditing your local units of government, your county, your municipality.
And that's got to be made clear, But
So,
it's tough running those races.
So Scott Jensen won dramatically over Nate George. So Scott Jensen lost dramatically to Tim Walz, and when Tim Walz ran for re-election. So
could I just mention
very unimpressive
But
guy.
the other thing, so Scott Jensen was also a state senator when some of this fraud was happening. So he also will have a hard time running on fraud.
Well, also, I want to address, Lisa Damuth. Her office is tagged with the leak that became the basis for that Nick Shirley video that, indicted all Somalians in the state of Minnesota for being fraudsters and got Metro Surge off the ground. So her office led eventually to Operation Metro Surge. So I think running against her is easy. And I want to address Michelle Tafoya as well. Whatever you think her moderation might be, she has a quote. She was on a radio show in Tennessee. This is a direct quote. I'm reading it. So, quote, she said, "I think right now, at least just kind of keeping a stiff upper lip. Maybe you take one less trip to Starbucks, and so that gas goes a little further. Until this thing is over and these gas prices go back down again, let's just try to be patriots about this." She's talking about the Iran war, which is historically unpopular. There has never, Craig, has there ever been a war that Americans have been less interested in and less behind than this one?
Not from start to finish. They turned on some of the wars later, but not from the very beginning. Let me mention this. Just it's a little bit off, but not quite. These are the races I think that if you had a blue wave, could really be affected. The governors and the state legislatures. The Democratic Party has not had a majority of the governorships since 2010, and they only had it between 2006 and 2010 for the last 30 years. That was the lead into Obama. They first won the governorships in 2006. They won the presidency two years later. I think they're going to get a majority of the governorships, and one of the advantages, it could be, at least, just think of this potentially. Ohio's close on governor. Georgia's close on governor. Texas is close on governor. Iowa's close on governor. And if you could add to that Florida, That would be a huge wave, just all in itself. And the other thing is that the state legislatures haven't been as gerrymandered as we have the U.S. House, because Trump was only interested in the U.S. House. Those states never gerrymandered their state legislatures. So if you have
Well,
a
they have in the
wave,
past.
what?
I mean, they're gerrymandered
Sure.
from the
Yeah, but
past.
now they're gerrymandering every 2 years, and the story is literally that they're already raising money, including the Democrats, to gerrymander after this election for just the next 2 years. That's crazy. But just if you got the governor of Texas, you've got 5 in the refrigerator, and you got 5 from the next reapportionment. I mean, so the people downplay governorships unless it's, someone who wants to do away with Thanksgiving. But watch the governorships and watch the state legislatures. I think there's a potential to get a trifecta in Wisconsin and in Minnesota this year.
I agree. I think for sure in Minnesota. And the reason why it's important to flip these governor races to blue across the country is because it's the states that are holding Trump accountable and litigating.
That's right.
And doing the job of the federal government, like oversight of mergers and acquisitions and healthcare, why our healthcare is so expensive. So this is why I think Craig is trying to make this. This is a really important point. And I saw in polling in the Ohio governor's race that Vivek Ramaswamy is not doing well, even though I think Musk and others are dumping in millions of dollars. So
well, he's getting booed off the stage by his own supporters for
that's
being
what I mean by
brown.
not doing well. Yeah, but the other thing, going back to Michelle
Tafoya.
The Tafoya, she has said way worse things than just talking about gas prices in the Iran war. She was talking about, Operation Metro Surge and same playbook as Trump, and talking about how the kids were safe during Operation Metro Surge. So, there's a lot of material to go after, even though she says she's independent, she has a spine, she doesn't necessarily support all of Trump. She has so far supported what the Trump administration has been doing, especially in Minnesota. So I think Minnesota is going to go blue all the way. And I think there's going to be all the Dems down ticket are going to ride those coattails of Amy Klobuchar, and it's going to go all blue.
Could I just add attorney generals? Because the state attorney generals have also been very, very in the president's face when he goes off the rails.
And Keith Ellison, chief among them. I mean, he's been terrific on that. But Craig, I kind of want to get a sense. I mean, when I was watching the election results last night, and I was up very late. I went to bed before Milwaukee finally got their act together, so I didn't know the final results till I woke up. But
they made a mistake.
They put the wrong information on the thumb drive, and then they drove the thumb drives all the way over to whatever. And then so they had to go back, get new thumb drives, and what a mess. But anyways, I was watching Steve Kornacki when Steve Kornacki's like guy or friend or whatever coworker told him what they did and that they wouldn't have the results for another couple hours. Steve Kornacki looked like someone just shot his dog. I mean, it was just wow. He was like, he was so broken up about it. It looked like he was about to cry. But anyways, he's very fun to watch, by the way. But anyways, when I was watching the returns in Minnesota, one of the first counties to report full numbers was Dakota County, which is the most populous county of Angie Craig's current district. And she only won Dakota County by 54 votes. That's it. So I was like, oh, well, wow. That's an early night for me, because Dakota County came in basically in full before Hennepin even released anything. Now, all of the handicappers were waiting until the Hennepin dropped, but I was like, oh, call it now. If she can't win Dakota County, it's over. And of course, all of the most populated counties and many of the rural counties were voted for Peggy Flanagan. I mean, it was like a wipeout throughout the state. And then Matt Little, who was the lefty running to replace Angie Craig, it was a wipeout in that race as well. The APAC candidate Matt Klein, and then Caleb Berg,
Matt Little is an expert campaigner. Like, he's unbelievable. He flipped a state Senate seat from red to blue and got young people involved. So it was also his campaign skills in putting together a team, I think, that really helped him when the other two were still sitting legislators and busy. But I will just say, I mean, Peggy Flanagan had a lot of endorsements from state legislators in Angie Craig's district. And so that has got to be a signal that tells you. But I think what really hurt Angie Craig is her vote on the Lake and Riley Act. And she took that vote early. And she took that vote before Senator Tina Smith announced her retirement from that U.S. Senate seat. So she took that vote thinking, I need to take this vote to help me get reelected in my tough district. She said that. I mean, I believe that's why she took that vote. But my people, like, man, you gotta educate your voters. You gotta educate that this is a bad bill and this is why I'm going to vote against it. You don't just say I'm going to vote for it to get reelected. Your job as an elected official is to educate your constituents and say, this is what's in this bill and this is what it will mean for people.
Yeah, and do right
she
doesn't.
By your you don't vote for it because, this will help me get elected in what I think is my moderate district. No, you educate the voters, and that is what has to change for every elected.
Yeah, could I just throw in another little thing that all of you kind of know, but I get very upset about, and that is about. I do hope the Democrats get the U.S. House. I would hope that they'd win it by 30 seats, which they kind of did. That's kind of, if you want to use a model, I think 2006 is a good model. It's a good model. Unpopular war, natural disasters. There's a similarity there, but in the state legislative races, and I know the Democrats, there were more Democrats that voted than Republicans, but we are told that in Minnesota, the first district is movable, right? Look at the results of the Democrats versus Republicans in the first district, and look at the Democrats and the Republicans in the 8th district. There are more Democrats that voted percentage-wise in the 8th district over the Republicans than in the first district. And in Wisconsin, clearly the 3rd district is up for grabs, and everybody knows it. Everybody's throwing money in it. I heard on national television again, the 1st district's supposed to be a big district in Wisconsin. You look at that district and look at the primary. The 8th district candidate and the 1st district candidate in this state got twice as many votes as the Democratic candidate did in the other state in Wisconsin. And I don't know how the national people decide which election and candidates to support, but I'm not impressed.
Well, a lot of people aren't impressed, and that's the DCCC. That's the campaign arm of the Democrats in the U.S. House, and they have this red to blue program, and they pick races. And you're right, they are missing races that should have been on that list, that they should have been helping those candidates a long ago. And this is the time. This is the year. If it's gonna be a blue wave, you need to pick those +8, +12 Trump districts. Those are doable. You can flip districts like that. And when you say, I looked at Minnesota's 8th congressional district and 1st congressional district, and the 1st district in Minnesota is on that red to blue list. The candidate raised a lot of money, over $1 million. Teacher, great background. This is Tim Walz's old congressional district that he flipped, and it's very similar to the 8th district. But if you look at how popular Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, did really well in the 8th congressional district.
Carried it.
So there's just more extremes because they've had Republicans in those districts for a long time dominating the messaging. And that's really hard to overcome in 1 or 2 cycles. So it may take longer, but they should be getting into those races now to build back those districts.
You're right.
Well, earlier I was talking about those the incredible wins by Flanagan and by Matt Little, and it was kind of a long-winded way, Craig, to get at how different things were for Democrats in Wisconsin vis-a-vis the left and insurgent candidates. I don't know how much you want to say Peggy Flanagan was insurgent, because obviously she's the sitting lieutenant governor. But the differences between Minnesota and Wisconsin go back politically, go back now a long ways. I mean, Wisconsin used to be the epicenter of leftist socialist politics when you go way back to Bob La Follette and all that kind of stuff. But it seems that Wisconsin has been further to the right than Minnesota for forever now. And I thought for a shining moment there, when I genuinely thought Francesca Hahn was going to pull it out, and I was thinking, my God, Wisconsin's flipping the script. But no, they're not. What is that difference between these two states? There's so many similarities between Minnesota and Wisconsin, but what is the difference, Craig? What is it about these two states that they're so different?
I could add to that no practically no Minnesotan on a national ticket has ever carried Wisconsin either. It's just a doggonest thing. But the one of the major differences is that Minnesota had Eugene McCarthy and Wisconsin had Joseph McCarthy. And that's one of the differences. And it's I'm serious about that. The Farmer Labor Party, as you know, merged with the Democratic Party in Minnesota, and in Wisconsin, they actually had a third party, which was the Progressive Party, which was an offshoot of the Republican Party. So the La Follette people were never socialist as such. They wanted transparency in government. They were the ones that pushed the direct primary to get rid of the bosses and all that kind of stuff. Now they did have a socialist party in Milwaukee. They had a mayor who was a socialist up until 1960, Frank Zeidler. And in fact, the person who Jen knows, who is now a congressman from Maryland, his uncle was a socialist and was very, very active during those years. Golda Meir was a socialist. Berger was literally a socialist. He a congressman who wasn't seated because he was a socialist.
You're talking about Representative Jamie Raskin, his father?
His uncle was Max Raskin, and he's very, very socialistic and very active in Wisconsin politics. But that was a separate party as such. They never they slowly drifted toward the Democrats when they started losing elections and that sort of thing. Somewhat similar to the Farmer Labor Party. But the progressives, some of them came over to Robert La Follette's grandson started running as a Democrat finally for attorney general, tried governorship and lost. So there's similar in that way. But I hate to say it, you've got that Joe McCarthy stuff there. And yet, he's buried in Appleton. The John Burke Society set up their headquarters in Appleton, and they went for Hahn last night. So I mean,
yes, Outagamie County. Way to go, Fox Valley.
It's kind of interesting. So there, but what I can't figure, I don't want to overstate this, but I was talking to Hubert Humphrey, and he said, I can't figure out why I always lose Wisconsin. and Mondale did too. And Waltz did too. I mean, it's just there's something there that they aren't quite on the same thing. But I know from growing up in Wisconsin and being part of don't want to say resurgence, but I was there when the resurgence started and all that in Wisconsin with Gaylord Nelson and Proxmire and all that kind of John Reynolds and all that kind of stuff. They were looking for leadership from Minnesota. They were trying to pattern themselves after Minnesota to start with. They got in a little more early on the environmental stuff. There was a little different labor history. But Wisconsin, Wisconsin was the first place to have workman's comp, sort of thing. So, they do have kind of a socialist tradition to that extent. They had in farming, they had a group called Farmers Equity, which is pretty kind of socialist. I mean, if you think about it, and I know you've been interested in farming and stuff like that, the whole co-op movement is a socialist enterprise. They're very strong they've been very strong in Minnesota and in Wisconsin.
But people think of that, the Scandinavian tradition, that we've had a lot of Scandinavians settle in Minnesota. Is it because more Germans settled in Wisconsin
I don't want to get into this too much, but there are more, there's a larger percentage of Germans in Wisconsin, started the kindergarten movement and that sort of stuff. Technically, there are more Germans than there are Norwegians in Minnesota. There's more Germans than there are Swedes. There's more Germans than anything else in Minnesota. And yet together, the Norwegians and Swedes have more dominated in Minnesota. But also Hubert, best of my knowledge, used Sweden as a model for David Brooks has been big on this recently and on NewsHour talking about Hubert Humphrey and
the Republican David Brooks.
Well, he's not, he's kind of Republican. He's not for the New York Times anymore either. But he was saying that and it's true. Humphrey and Walter Reuther had to get rid of their communist wing of the first the party here and then the UAW even. But you need a model if you're going to get rid of this and you're opposing that, which is laissez-faire capitalism. And so Humphrey used the Scandinavian social democratic models as his star.
Well, I grew up in Wisconsin too, so Sammy got two cheeseheads here, but and now we both live in Minnesota. But hey, so when I was in Wisconsin, you got Dave Obey was big. I worked on Russ Feingold's campaign. He was sort of the Wisconsin Wellstone. And things started going south when Russ Feingold lost and Dave Obey retired. And they lost a lot of strong leaders that I think if they would have stayed, Wisconsin would have been more like Minnesota. But they gerrymandered, they got Scott Walker. You saw the resistance that continued. You get Ben Wickler in as a Democratic state chair. He starts organizing and doing different things and mobilizing. So I think they're maybe on a trajectory now to follow Minnesota. I think things are different. They still have to, figure out gerrymandered districts, but we could see them follow.
I think they're relatively fair in Wisconsin right now.
Okay.
But the person you didn't mention was the person that beat Feingold, which was Johnson. And Ron Johnson's coming up in 2 years. That's going to be a key race. I don't think he's going to run for re-election. And
he just became chair of a huge committee. So
I understand he's going to find out he doesn't like that job. I'll bet you, because he's right in the middle of trouble.
I disagree. I think he likes power. The first time he had the gavel, he did a rebuttal of every person's comment. I mean, that's not what a chair does, but he did. He wanted the opportunity.
I did hear that.
Yeah, he wanted the opportunity to rebut every person that spoke, every Democrat.
Well,
that's
hopefully
amazing.
They won't have the majority.
He's in the running for dumbest member of the U.S. Senate.
Who's that?
Ron Johnson.
Ron Johnson.
Oh yeah, but what competition he has!
Yes, Tommy Tuberville. Well, he's not in the Senate anymore, or won't be. But yeah, he does have competition. It's true.
But watch that race, because I think a lot of guys waiting are in the wings.
My guess is, do you think the former lieutenant governor from Wisconsin dropped out thinking he'd run for the Senate seat instead? Barnes.
I think he thought that was his only chance to run for that seat. But watch Scott Walker. He's not done with politics. Coming back as a Republican, and You talk about Minnesota and Wisconsin. I'm not sure of this. These are all guesses, right? I think if Emmer had beat Dayton for governor, Emmer would have turned Minnesota into a right to work law state
Yep.
too, and would have followed. And we came that close to ending up like Wisconsin as a right to work law state now. You don't have to belong to a union to to work on a job. All the state employees, there's no unions. It's a difference. It's a more conservative state than Minnesota.
And Jen and I had a conversation when we were talking about when they the sentencing came down for the guy that killed Melissa Hortman. We were talking about Melissa Hortman and her legacy and kind of the legacy of the DFL lately in the House, and how I have nothing but praise for Melissa Hortman's wrangling of a very narrow majority to pass an enormous number of bills, some of which are very left-wing coded. When they had the small window of opportunity to do it, they did it. They had the power and they used it. And what Jen's response to me was, which I thought was very, very eye-opening, was that they'd had that moment in the past and decided not to do anything with it, decided not to be bold. And then Republicans came storming in, and they never wait. They always get power and use it. And I feel like Democrats in Minnesota have learned that lesson. Now, Democrats in Wisconsin haven't had a chance to do that yet, but I'm worried after seeing this primary election that just happened, that if Democrats take the trifecta in Wisconsin, they're going to make the same mistakes that Democrats made in Minnesota 20 years ago and not take that power and be bold and use it. Because they decided to go with Crowley, who is like, this is like adamantly
but if they
bipartisan or whatever.
If they get the trifecta, Sam, Minnesota folks are going to tell them, you got to do everything when you have power. Because hopefully they'll learn from Minnesota, the lesson we learned when they had that first trifecta.
But they didn't pass the first test of that, because I have watched several. When you asked, is Crowley very good speaker and all that, the reason I didn't think so is because I've watched several of his interviews and they're just bad. They're just bad.
Maybe, but it was such a close race. So I just feel like, those 60,000 votes that were spoiled because they voted early and they voted for candidates that dropped out of the race. It could have easily went for Francesca Hahn. It just didn't.
There's another historic thing in Wisconsin, and that is there is, at least as long as I've known the state, there is a split, just a natural geographic split between Madison and Milwaukee. And Milwaukee gets support from places like Ozark, Waukesha, Racine Democrats, et cetera, like that. And what's interesting, where I think David is going to have to do things is in northern Wisconsin and over on the border, because he really looked weak. Crowley really looked weak there. And being from Milwaukee, there's a natural anti-Milwaukee feeling in northern Wisconsin also.
Joel Cypress has said the same thing when we had him on as a guest yesterday, that if candidates from Madison, Milwaukee, they don't do well statewide because of that stigma of being from those urban centers.
We see it here, where it's, the Twin Cities, it's, anti-Twin Cities stuff. But the Twin Cities has gotten so big that they're 2/3 of the state's population, where
right.
Milwaukee, and if I could put in a plug for Wisconsin, one thing Wisconsin and other states have done better than Minnesota is that they have taken state money and they've scattered it around the state so that you really have a multi-university campuses, et cetera, around the state, each with their own mission and all that kind of stuff. And you have centers of power here around that are competitive to Madison and Milwaukee. In this state, as somebody once said, we've created a black hole, and it just sucks everything into it. Um, uh, Governor Perpich tried as hard as he could to reverse that by moving up NRI to Duluth and some of the state functions to Duluth. Oberstar tried to do that sort of thing with Northwest Airlines, et cetera, et cetera. But boy, that power is so strong. And I don't mean Minneapolis, St. Paul. I mean the cities, as they call it, right? Which now includes practically St. Cloud and Rochester, practically now.
It does. Yeah, that's a good point, Craig. And I think you're right. The population is more spread out in Wisconsin. I mean, they have bigger small towns, more of them than Minnesota, and more opportunity not to have to live in Milwaukee or Madison. So that's a really good point. I was thinking, have you been tracking the Iowa races? And if you have, what's the latest?
My best source tells me they think it's turning purple, which is better than it was. I think they've got a couple of good lead candidates right now in the race. Iowa is hurting harder as a farm state than other states are. They've got health care front and center because their cancer rate's been going up, and their of course their prices have been hurt, et cetera. And if you remember, people keep forgetting this. Iowa went for Obama twice, and they do that sort of. They went for Truman in '48. I mean, they can be a swing state, and I think they can swing, but I think it's wider than that. You don't have to follow me on this, but just try to picture this. The model, which isn't being used in that state, but it was the model, was North Dakota. North Dakota, as I think you know, way back when we were farmer labor, the same guy that started that really was from Minnesota, but he started something in North Dakota called the Nonpartisan League. And then later they merged with the Democratic Party. But if you remember, North Dakota produced some very good Democrats, Conrad and Dorgan and all, not that long ago. So what they've decided to do in the Plains states is to go nonpartisan. And there's a very, Osborne's got a great name because he has the name of the coach, of the University of Nebraska when they were good in football. And South Dakota's got a nonpartisan guy running against Rounds. There's a fellow in Montana. Yeah, that's doing the same thing. It's kind of the Plains nonpartisanship that's going on now. And the vets are involved in this. They're supporting some of the candidates, but they're not calling themselves Democrats. In fact, the Democrats, as you've seen, are pulling out of those races to give them a clear shot at the Republicans. I talked to a guy from South Dakota who's running for state legislature. He doesn't think the nonpartisan guy's going to knock off Rounds, but I think Nebraska's got a potential. I think Iowa, even though they're running as Democrats, I think he's got a real shot at it. I'm more worried about Michigan, to tell you the truth.
Do you think Troy Jackson's going to beat Susan Collins in Maine?
I think there's a possibility, and I think Bernie getting burned in Maine prevented him from coming in. They held that against Hahn in Wisconsin that Bernie didn't come out for. I think he's got burned once. He's kind of pulled back a little bit. Besides, that doesn't have anything to do with the Congress. So. Right.
And Noah, that's his explanation largely, is that we don't get into statewide, governor races and stuff. But I'm on record on this show, Craig, that Dan Osborne has a better shot in Nebraska than James Tallarico does in Texas. I'm still a major Texas skeptic when it comes to Democratic chances. What do you think of that? What do you think about Dan Osborne, his chances
Oh,
versus Tallarico's
I
chances?
think he came close last time, and I think he's got a good chance. And Nebraska's an interesting state. They have Democratic governors, right, etc. I've been a Tellerico fan for quite some time, and I see
Oh,
him
wow.
changing. Yeah, I see him changing things in a number of ways nationwide. Um, and what he's got going for him this time is he's got a woman running for governor who's holding her own, and that the last time there was a weak candidate for governor, so that I think Texas got it. You can tell Abbott's scared. I mean, he all of a sudden put a moratorium on data centers.
Yep.
Yes, he
He's
did.
scared. He's
Yeah.
scared.
And Paxton, I mean, really bad great candidate for Democrats to run against.
Oh.
Yeah.
The ones that are kind of, to me, interesting to watch is New Mexico governor, first Native American potentially, and she's former Interior Secretary
Deb Haaland.
Yep.
Yeah, the one, if you notice, in Arizona, picked a Republican for her lieutenant governor. That's kind of a nonpartisan thing that's going on there. If you could take Governor of Texas, Keisha is such a great candidate in Georgia, right? Bottoms, and then doggone Florida.
Craig, I'm going to remain a huge skeptic for Democratic chances in Texas and Florida. Talk me out of that. Why should people get their hopes up for? I mean, Texas, the polls really are. There hasn't been a single poll showing Paxton ahead for like a month and a half now. So maybe you can win me over on the Texas Senate race, but governor and then Florida.
I think it's got to be the Latino voters. They're switching from Trump Republicans to Dems, right?
Right. And in Texas, yes, and not in Florida yet, but in Texas, that's true. And my background, well, first of all, my grandfather came from Texas, but my background is some of the most liberal Democrats I ever met were from Texas because they're always under attack. Ralph Yarborough was their hero back in the day.
Well, there's a book. I haven't read it yet. I mean to, but it's called "The Myth of Red Texas," which is about the history of the ranchers and the cattlemen and all those people who were socialists, basically. And
this is the state of Governor Ann Richards, and Molly Ivins. Come on.
Yep.
But going way back, it has an incredibly leftist history.
And even, now it's not going to happen this time, but Oklahoma had Fred Harris, if you remember him. He was a political science guy. He was a senator. Went back into political science after he left the Senate. He became a teacher in New Mexico for Deb Haaland, who's running it for governor of. That's how she inspired her to get into politics.
Going back to Sam's question, so what's going on in Florida that you think Dems might have a chance?
Well, they've got. First of all, if you go back, you'd think there's roots there. I mean, you remember 2000, right? That was a handful of votes, right? In 2000.
Yeah.
The Chads, they were hanging.
Right? That was 20 years ago. I understand that. But you've got a guy running for the Democrats who's a former Republican, right? You would think that some of those people are getting pretty tired of that kind of leadership that's come out of Florida for them recently. There's always the differences of Hispanics, I guess. They've always been kind of conservative because of the Cuban background, that group in Miami and things like that. But the last, he's getting about 40%. The candidate, there's some stuff that some people are not happy with him, the Republican candidate. The Trump candidate, as it were. I'm just saying that if you got Texas and Florida, it breaks the back of the South. with Georgia. I mean, and you look what happened in North Carolina. You got a potential North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. I mean, that's unheard of. And already have Virginia. That's the eastern part of the Confederacy.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. And I
Let's
think
hope you're right. Let's hope you're right, Craig.
I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm
Yeah.
saying,
Well, maybe not this cycle, but at least they can get closer. They can close the gap.
but people forget about giving resources to them.
Yeah.
You know, when
Well,
they think
part of that is the in-state party in Florida is just a nightmare.
it's
I mean,
terrible.
they're terrible.
They just don't know how to organize. But there's enough Northerners that if they put their stuff together, they could help. You know, they don't. They think they're retired. You know, they're not gonna.
But you know what? Trump and the Republicans are attacking folks' benefits for older adults. I mean,
Absolutely.
Social Security, they're cutting Medicare. I mean, come on,
Absolutely.
you don't touch those things. I think older adults in Florida are going to be voting against the Republicans because they're hurting their retirement funds.
Yes, I would think so. And then you got Medicaid. You know, there's if
Well, is it Craig? I mean, I think it's got to be a candidate quality issue because if you have someone who can clearly articulate the economic message like Mamdani did in New York, like Abdul El Sayed did in Michigan, you got to have that absolutely crystal clear articulation of the economic argument and deflect every cultural thing back to money in your pocket and money out of politics. Use that line. I mean, I'm sure El Sayed would not mind anyone stealing his line. It's a good line. I mean, just like get things back to dollars and cents, get things back to like the clear economic message. People are hurting, people are struggling. And the crazy thing to me is Republicans are saying things almost identically. Hey, don't believe your lying eyes. Everything's going great. It was the same argument that Kamala Harris was running on in 2024. You're not hurting. Everything's great. The economy's doing great. And nobody wanted to hear that. And now Republicans are running out the exact same playbook that Harris ran on. And I think it's going to hurt them massively. But Democrats can't clean up on it if they don't have the right candidates with the right message.
That's true.
And that's why I'm so invested in these. That's why I'm so invested in these leftist candidates who are relentlessly on message with this stuff. That's why I'm so appreciative.
It couldn't be easier for Democrats right now. The messaging is so simple and so clear, and they just have to repeat it. What Sam was saying about these economic messages.
The additional thing that got going in Florida is insurance rates. Their housing insurance rates are terrible, so terrible that they're setting up a state. They got a state insurance. I think that's called socialism.
I think you're right. Oh, this has been great, Craig. You're a great guest. We have to have you on more often to talk about what's going on politically and get your predictions.
Could I just mention one other little thing about Tellerico? You might keep your eyes open for, and that's I noticed Peggy was talking about going to church.
Oh,
and
yeah, she did a lot. Every speech. That's right. She brings it up
and
in
basically
every speech.
saying that, the change that's occurred. Instead of saying that they're going to mainline churches, they say they're going to love thy neighbor churches, and I don't think that's an accident. Well, just something for you to watch.
You got to differentiate between these Christian nationalists who are wrecking our country, like Mike Johnson.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, such a danger. Talk about danger to democracy right there.
Yeah.
Well, I'll throw out, speaking of Christians, by the way, normally I wouldn't know one damn thing about the Kansas Senate race, but the Democrat, who is a pastor at a megachurch, is polling only 1 point behind the Republican in a recent poll, which is Kansas.
Oh, yes. I heard him on a podcast. He's amazing. He's an amazing story.
He's got the largest United Methodist Church in the country.
He had to retire from that to run, but yeah.
I don't usually think of a megachurch pastor as being a love thy neighbor type.
No, they don't usually go together, do they? But my line, by the way, on the Christian nationalists is we tried this before the Revolutionary War. Most of our colonies had state churches. Didn't work out very well. It really didn't. People didn't go to church. They
Yeah,
don't like
well,
state. The reason they don't like state churches is they taxed them. Why become a state church if you can't tax them, right?
well,
People
it's
don't like tax.
all about the Benjamins, right? It's all about those dollars.
Well, we shouldn't take any more of your time, Craig. This has been great. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yes, thank you so much, Craig.
And-
So, there's a lot more to cover. We've basically just been talking about elections, which is a lot of fun, and we'll continue talking about them. We've got, what do we have next week? We have Florida. Florida's next week. There's some big down ballot races in Florida to follow, including Oliver Larkin running a pretty healthy campaign against one of the most conservative Democrats in the country, Jared Moskowitz. So that's definitely worth keeping an eye on, along with some other races in Florida. We'll be getting into all those next week. Tomorrow we have yet another guest. Hope you'll join us for that. But on behalf of our guest, Craig Grau and Jen Schultz, I'm Sam Martin, and this has been Our Dissent.